It really is a great pleasure for me to finally be here at the Marshall Center. I've known many leaders of this institution, many faculty members, many graduates from these courses from the countries of Eastern Europe where I've served, but I've never actually had a chance to come here until today. So I'm honored, first and foremost, to have been asked to give the graduation address, and I'm glad to have a chance to meet some of you, particularly the Ukrainian students who I met a little bit earlier. I have to say, General Wachter, that the Marshall Center is as impressive as I've heard. I think it is a great thing that the German government has done to provide this wonderful facility, as well as the financial support that you've provided for all of these many years. The Marshall Center is a living symbol of our alliance and our commitment to building ties with young leaders from countries in Europe and from all around the world. And while I've just had the pleasure of meeting General Wachter on this trip, there are 3 other leaders of this institution who are longtime colleagues and friends of mine. They are 3 men for whom I have the greatest respect, men with whom I have worked in various and different capacities during my career. The director, General Keith Dayton, the deputy director, Dr. Jim McDougall, and the dean, Dr. Robert Brannon. All 3 of these men have served our country, the United States, with great distinction. And I know they have brought the same commitment and creativity to the Marshall Center that they have shown throughout their distinguished careers of service to the United States. I would like, first of all, today to congratulate all of you, the graduates, in this wonderful class. I hope you found the course challenging. Judging from the video, you all studied hard, but you also had some fun. You did what the director told you to do. If this experience was successful, it made you stop and think, not just about the academic subjects that you studied here, but about yourself and the role each one of you plays in your own country, whether it be as a military officer, security expert, or civilian expert within your specific area of expertise. As General Dayton mentioned, several years ago I had the opportunity to serve as a faculty member at our National War College. I was the senior State Department representative at the college, and my office was right across the hall from Bob Brannon. I was supposed to be a professor, but I have to confess to you that I think I learned more from my students than I ever taught to them. It was just a wonderful, wonderful experience for me. And I hope you had a similarly satisfying experience here in Garmisch. I hope you learned as much from your fellow participants as you did from your professors. And it's wonderful, I have to say, to look through the list of students in this class, to see the video. You come from so many different countries, so many different specialties, so many different cultures. And I'm sure that this experience broadened your knowledge and your perspective on the world. And as General Dayton said, I hope that you will all keep in touch with each other as you pursue your careers. This is one of the great things about the internet. Distance doesn't matter anymore. You can still stay in close touch no matter how far away you are. I found the 9 months that I spent at the National War College provided an enormously valuable time for study and personal reflection. It helped me to focus on my future goals and to understand how I, as a diplomat, could play a positive role in this complicated and rapidly changing world in which we live. Many of the things I learned didn't occur to me, frankly, until after I had finished the course. And I suspect that you'll be surprised how many times things that you learned here will come back into focus only months or even years from now and give you some new perspective, some fresh idea on your work. So now that you're about to graduate from this prestigious institution, how are you going to use what you learned here to make you a better officer or civilian leader? I know that everyone thinks a graduation speaker is supposed to tell you the secrets of success in life. If you came thinking that today, I'm going to disappoint you. Because I subscribe to the view of our former Secretary of State, Colin Powell, who once said, "There are no secrets of success. Success is the result of perfection, hard work, learning from failure, loyalty to those for whom you work, and persistence." I'll repeat those. Perfection, hard work, learning from failure, loyalty to those for whom you work, and persistence. They actually sound like secrets to success to me. Obviously, I can't tailor my remarks to each one of your specific specialties or career fields, but let me offer you my own set of Colin Powell-like suggestions based on 40 years of experience in the diplomatic trenches, most of it in Eastern Europe. First of all, be open to change. Don't be intimidated by it. One of the fundamental realities of international relations today is the speed with which developments occur and the even faster speed with which major and minor events are reported or distorted via the internet and the international media. Simply keeping up with this speed is a challenge enough. Too often, we find ourselves reacting to events rather than trying to use our knowledge to shape these events in ways which would support our policy goals. Now, if you're like most people, the experience you've had here at the Marshall Center has given you a lot more knowledge. But it might seem that the accumulation of this knowledge may even threaten to overwhelm you. The world may now seem more complicated and maybe even more hopeless than when you arrived here 10 weeks ago. Well, if that's your impression, don't lose faith. Many others have had similar experiences in similar kinds of courses. Judging from my conversations with others who've taken this course, I do hope that your studies here have also given you the ability to think through the problems you confront. I hope they have helped give you the ability to conceptualize the problems that you're going to confront and to try to understand more rapidly how solving those problems will help channel or change the world that you live in. Second is what General Dayton mentioned. Be agents for change. Yes, trying to manage or channel change can be like riding a tiger, but I'll bet that you are all now better able to be a catalyst for change or to steer change in the right direction than when you came here. Walter Isaacson, whose biography of Steve Jobs was one of last year's best books, and if you haven't read it, I urge you to read it. It's being translated into about every language known to man. Isaacson said, he told the story in particular of when Jobs decided that he wanted a special kind of glass for the Apple iPhone that he was inventing. Jobs was told that the best glass for this new iPhone, this new brand new invention, was being made by Corning Glass of New York. But the glass had never been put into production. It had been developed in the lab, and there it had sat. There were no factories, no production lines to make this glass. Well, Steve Jobs went to visit the head of Corning Glass, and he told him what he needed. And the chairman thought it was a good idea. He thought maybe this is some kind of business venture we could develop over a few years. And so he said to Steve, so when will you need this glass? And Jobs said, by September. And the CEO choked and said, that's 3 months from now. And Jobs said, yes, but I know you can do it. The CEO protested, and Jobs looked at him firmly in the eye and said, I know you can do it. Steve Jobs, the ultimate entrepreneur and catalyst for change, convinced this CEO to immediately convert a Corning glass factory in Louisville, Kentucky to start producing this wonderful glass. He met Steve Jobs' deadline, and the iPhone, well, that's history. The lesson here is don't underestimate your ability to change if you set your mind to it. Third, don't lose sight of your goals. I've spent my whole life working at the U.S. State Department as a diplomat abroad or as part of our foreign affairs bureaucracy in Washington. Every time I took a new job, I set personal goals for myself. Often, some of them simply mirrored our overall foreign policy goal in the area where I was working. But I always told myself to be creative, to try to imagine new solutions to old problems. Don't just accept the status quo. And I always battled to not get worn down by the bureaucracy. George Shultz, who was one of our great secretaries of state, in my view, used to tell his staff that serving in government was often like sailing a boat across a lake. As you set out on the voyage, you could see your destination in the distance across the lake. But often the winds would come up and they would blow the boat off course. The key, in Schultz's view, was to keep a steady hand on the rudder and to tack before the wind, to go back and to go forth, even as you moved slowly but steadily across the lake. Above all, Schultz used to say to his staff, never, never lose sight of that ultimate goal across the lake. If you kept it in sight and you were a clever sailor, you would succeed and you would arrive at your goal. Fourth, understand the strategic uses of different kinds of power and be promoters of openness and democratic values. Winston Churchill once said, the empires of the future are the empires of the mind. Yes, many of the fundamental motivating goals of foreign policy remain the same. But the way people achieve them now are entirely different. I'm sure that you spent a long time during your course studying the differences between hard power and soft power. I think that that study will repay you 1,000 times in the years ahead as you pursue your careers. The hard reality, which we all eventually come to, is that while there are certainly a critical role for hard power, particularly the use of military force, the lasting resolution of intrastate problems is usually dependent on tough negotiation and compromise. And it often depends on non-governmental actors as much as it does on governmental actors. Soft power can often achieve the goals you set more quickly and with a much smaller use of resources, both financial and human. By promoting openness and democratic values, you will guarantee yourself the greatest chance of achieving the kind of long-lasting change that you desire. Now, to be sure, successful democratic societies have to have healthy market economies. They have to have good governance. And above all, they have to be ruled by law. I have spent many years of my career in Eastern Europe trying to help governments there build a sustainable post-Soviet market economy and a country where all leaders, all citizens, are subject to the rule of law. Building a system of justice applicable to all and enforceable with all is one of the hardest things to do in a democracy, but it is absolutely one of the most critical requirements. Fifth, maintain high ethical standards. Don't go down the road of corruption. My years of experience in Eastern Europe have taught me that nothing is as corrosive as rampant corruption. It undercuts the confidence people have in their society and their leaders. It destroys that fundamental social fabric of young democratic societies, leading to rampant cynicism about the future and distrust of all political leaders. I believe it also, in the end, destroys the individuals who practice corruption, whether they are caught or not, because it is simply hard to live a lie, to profess high goals and at the same time lead a personal life which is a constant repudiation of those goals. The leaders that we most admire in the world are primarily men and women who adhere to a high moral code, whatever the circumstances they find themselves. Sixth and finally, treat people well and they will be loyal and supportive of you and your goals. Now this sometimes seems so self-evident that it seems like a cliche. But we all know too many leaders, too many bosses who don't demonstrate fundamental decency to those whom they are charged to lead. I'm not saying that you need to coddle those who work for you. Far from it. You need to lead by example, and here we go back to the need to practice high ethical values. You need to hold your subordinates to those high values, pat them on the back when they do a good job, and counsel them when they don't. Colin Powell once said, anytime you tolerate mediocrity in others, it increases your own mediocrity. I'm a big believer in the truism that you praise subordinates' performance in public optimally before their peers, and you counsel them in private behind closed doors. Okay, there are my 6. Now some of you are probably saying to yourself, okay, Ambassador, it all sounds good. But it's really hard to be faithful to these ideals and goals in the face of the brutal realities that we live in this world. It's hard in the face of bureaucracies that make it very, very difficult to achieve concrete goals. And I would say in reply, you are exactly right. But you have before you at this institution, I would argue, a model, a man who embodied these values as much as almost anyone I know, and that's General George C. Marshall. Now, I apologize if you've already heard this during your coursework, but I'm going to repeat it because it's something I believe in. I've long admired Marshall as not only the consummate soldier diplomat, one of the true American statesmen of the last century. I've always admired Marshall, though, because he brought together that peculiar American mix of hard-headed honesty and pragmatic idealism. He understood the complex task of using the levers of national power intelligently. He was a great strategist, and he weighed carefully the risks of every undertaking. He built the greatest military machine the world has ever known, but he also understood the cost of using military power. During the Second World War, Marshall, who was chief of the military staff, never forgot those who were dying for our country. The human cost of war. Every 2 weeks, he sent President Roosevelt the lists of the U.S. casualties to remind him of the cost to our country. Because, as he said, you get hardened to these things. You have to be very careful to keep them in the forefront of your mind. As a diplomat, Marshall displayed an acute understanding of human nature. One of my favorite Marshall quotes is the one where he said, "If man does find the solution for world peace, it will truly be the most revolutionary reversal of his record we have ever known." He knew it was much easier to attempt to use force, but that diplomacy and persuasion were often the key to long-term solutions. World War II taught him a lot. He admitted that he made mistakes, and he tried to learn from them. He said, "The great lesson to be learned in the battered towns of England and the ruined cities of Germany is that the best way to win a war is to prevent it from occurring in the first place." Trying to prevent a recurrence of war was, of course, as you know, his ultimate goal in the immediate post-war aftermath. We know today how far-seeing was the Marshall Plan and the effort to build a security structure which would provide for a long-term and effective peace. Long before Joe Nye coined the term soft power, I would argue Marshall understood what it was and how to use it. Ultimately, what I admire most about General Marshall was his ability to stay in the game, to fight for what he believed in, both within the American bureaucracy and in consultation with our allies during World War II. He knew that he could not change things without steady and continuing engagement. He didn't quit even when things got hard, even when he failed. In the end, for me, General Marshall embodied, as well as anyone I have ever studied or met, the famous "man in the arena" quote of former President Theodore Roosevelt. This quote, I will confess to you, has motivated me throughout my 40-plus years in public service. And I offer it to you today in conclusion of my remarks in the hope that it will give you some inspiration as you return to your positions in the service of your country. For this is a quote which can be the motto, and should be the motto, for every man and woman in public service. Theodore Roosevelt said, and I'm quoting, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deed, who knows the great enthusiasm, the great devotion, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat." I thank you for having me here today. It's been a privilege. I wish you all the best of luck